How's it going, everybody? Happy Tuesday night. I know I'm rarely on a Tuesday, and I'm never on late at night, except for very rare occasions, but tonight is a rare occasion. Thought I'd come on, do a video. So, what's the topic at hand tonight? Well, a few weeks back, I did several videos on my top five most hated films, my top five most hated horror films. Then I did my top five favorite horror films, and I also did a video analyzing Stephen King's novels. Tonight, we're back to the top five. This one's gonna be a little different. This one's my top five most underrated horror films that I like. So, should be an interesting discussion. We'll see. You'll get my thoughts on why I think it's underrated, and who knows, maybe for those of you that watch this will agree, or maybe I'll shine some light on you for you to go out and watch the movie for yourself if you haven't already. So without further ado, my top five most underrated horror films. Coming in at number five, this one's going to sound a little ridiculous, but I'm sticking with it. Coming in at number five of my fifth most underrated horror film, Predator. Justin, what are you talking about? Predator's not underrated. It is for me. I've gone 36 years without watching it. So yeah. I actually watched it for the first time last month, or maybe it was 2 months ago. And I can't believe it took me so goddamn long to watch it. It was an insanely good film to me. The fact that it takes so long for us to see the Predator, I found very interesting. It's very similar to the old Frankenstein films. We don't see the monster until like the last 20 minutes of the film, right? We don't see the bride of Frankenstein until the last 10 minutes of the film. With Predator, we sort of see it in camouflage, but not really. And then when it finally reveals its badass self, you can't help but just applaud. I loved that film. I couldn't believe that it took me so damn long to watch it, and the fact that it just works. Of course, we all know, for those of you that have seen it, obviously, the badass showdown between Arnold Schwarzenegger and in the Predator is just absolutely epic. So yeah, considering that it took me so goddamn long to watch it, I'm listing it. I'm listing it in my underrated films at number five. But refer to my list because my memory tends to suck, right? Coming in at number four is another film that I only recently watched, and that is the movie Zombie, Zombi. It is actually considered to be a sequel to Dawn of the Dead, but it's an Italian film. Uh, so it could be considered drawing a blank right now. Holy crap. Giallo. But yeah, it's considered an unofficial sequel to Dawn of the Dead. For those that know me, or you watched the video on my top five favorite horror films, you'd know that Dawn of the Dead is my second favorite horror film. So I watched Zombie for the first time, and I believe I watched it. And before I always enjoy looking up films before I watch them, just so I have a little bit of an idea of what I'm getting myself into. Because God forbid something, you know, I just like to be a little bit prepared. So I believe I came across the fact that it was an official sequel to Dawn of the Dead. So I was like, wait, really? Is that legal? Can they do that? Apparently they can. So I actually watched the movie a couple months back. I really enjoyed it, and it's still on Tubi, so I'm probably going to watch it again so I can appreciate it even more. And basically, it's very reminiscent of Dawn of the Dead. The way the zombies interact, the way the zombies look. There's a lot more there's actually one particular scene with the zombies. There's a zombie under the water, and he's actually biting into a shark. And do I need to say anymore? Like, not a shark biting into a human, a zombie biting into a shark. Like, that's just freaking cool. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, that's awesome. So, like I said, I only watched it once, just like Predator, but it's definitely underrated because I feel like a lot of people don't even know that it exists. Never mind the fact that it's a Dawn of the Dead sequel. So yeah, my number 4 most underrated horror film, Zombie. Coming in at number 3 is a recent horror film that's come out over the last few years. In this particular case, I am referring to Last Night in Soho. It's kind of sort of a dark fantasy crime horror, but nevertheless, it stars Anya Taylor-Joy as a woman who is seen in flashbacks. And I remember when the film came out, it was like a couple years, I want to say it was like 2021 or 2022. And if you remember when COVID happened, it was we always had these films would come out for literally like one day. And I remember being at home thinking, why do they have films coming out for just a day? But you had to do it because nothing was safe, right? But then here we go, flash forward to a year, and a year later, 2 years later, and we were still doing it. We're actually still doing it. I think there's a couple films now. They'll only release it for a limited time. Last Night in Soho was one of those films, and I just remember seeing the previews of it, the movie trailer, and I was just like, oh god, what is that? And basically, it's about a girl who can see ghosts, I guess, and I would say she can see ghosts. Um, she's in tune, let's put it that way, and she has dreams that she sees this woman played by Anya Taylor-Joy back in the '60s, and it inspires her. She's a fashion designer, and it inspires her to get her hairdo like her, to create dresses that she wore back in the day, and basically she realizes that she's seeing this woman's life unravel before her eyes. So, and it's very it's I would say it's a psychological horror, absolutely, and I just love the film. In fact, I don't know if I can show you, but if you look on that side right there, you see that poster right there? That's a Last Night in Soho poster. So yeah, you could say I like the film. That is my number 3 most underrated horror film. Coming in at number 2, another recently made horror film. This one is by Guillermo del Toro, and it is called Crimson Peak. Now, I know that there is a small niche of people who absolutely love this film, and I also know that there's people who have never heard of it at all. I was actually at a steampunk festival last year, and back in January, and I actually saw a necklace that reminded me of one of the creatures in Crimson Peak, and I brought it up to the person that was selling the necklace, and I was like, "Oh, this reminds me of Crimson Peak. Have you guys heard of that?" And they're like, "No, I've never heard of that." And I was like, "Oh, good film, right?" So Crimson Peak is about the girl from Alice in Wonderland, whose name always is hard to pronounce. You know who I'm talking about. And basically, it's old fashioned back in the day. She marries Tom Hiddleston, Loki, and her poor father gets murdered. And basically, she goes to this house, this haunted house, this creepy. I want to say, what is it? It's a clay. They're on like a clay foundation. It's very weird. The only time you ever see clay, right? And it's very haunting. It's very chilling. I would say it's a slow burn horror film. Very gothic. Absolutely, I would say it's a gothic horror film. very old fashioned. I guess that's why I appreciate it. The color, like the reason it's called Crimson Peak, right? Because of the red clay. Uh, there's just so many things I like about the film. I don't know why. I was I was just drawn to it. There's actually a book I want to get on Crimson Peak, but I'll probably never own it because it's like limited. It was like a limited release and it's like $200. But can you imagine? And finally, the number one, my number one most underrated horror film, Tourist Trap. Have you ever heard of the film? If you know me, or if you ever come across me and we have a conversation about horror because you like horror too, uh, one thing that I will most likely bring up and ask you is, have you ever seen Tourist Trap? It stars Chuck Connors, yes, that Chuck Connors of The Rifleman, Tanya Roberts, and Jocelyn. Oh God, I'm blanking on her last name. Jocelyn. Oh God, I can't remember her last name. But Jocelyn Monroe, I believe. Well, anyway, it's it's a movie about, let's see, four teenagers, 4 or 5 teenagers, I believe it's four, who they're in their car, they're out driving, their car breaks down, and they end up at this old tourist place, which is called a tourist trap. Back in the day, it'd be like this old rundown sideshow on the side of the road, and that's how they get you to come in, right? And they come across it, and it's owned by good old Chuck Connors, and he shows them his, sideshow, if you will, mannequins, and he's very friendly, a little too friendly, but basically things start getting a little creepy and a little too eerie and strange. And before you know it, it's one of those classic teenagers getting offed one by one until the crazy and epic reveal. Uh, Couple fun facts about this film. I first watched it, I want to say before 2020, so it was before COVID. And I remember, actually, it might have been 2022. I might have been in, I might have been in a motel room. I remember catching the tail end of it on basic cable. Not even cable, basic TV, because I was watching basic TV because I didn't have cable for the time being. Whatever. I caught the tail end of this film, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" And I immediately was drawn to it because I saw Chuck Connors, the Rifleman, and I was like, "Wait a minute, the Rifleman's in a horror film? This can't, this can't be real, right?" And I think I tried to look it up on my phone, and I immediately went to, like, I googled Chuck Connors, and I'm like, Tourist Trap? Is that the movie that I just saw the tail end of? Then I finally watched it from beginning to end, and I was like, wow, this is a really good film. Why do people not talk about this more? Then I saw it on it was on Tubi, I think, for the first time. I immediately watched it. I think I've seen it like two more times since. I even watched it with my best friend. I introduced her to it, and she liked it. And yeah, it's a really good film. I highly, highly recommend it. It's actually so good that Stephen King, I believe, even referenced at one point and said that it's the right amount of horror and it's very underrated for its time. It doesn't get the praise that it should. There are a couple of things in the film that I don't particularly like. Uh, that I'm not going to spoil it for you, but certain things don't get explained exactly. But if you just push that aside, it's still a really good film overall. So I will say that. Finally, you may remember, or maybe I didn't mention this, I actually have a Tourist Trap shirt that I bought myself for Christmas last year. I love it. It's like one of my favorite shirts, and I have a ton of shirts. So, yeah, you can. You can imagine. So I might actually get myself another Tourist Trap shirt this year too, as well. So yeah, that's my number one most underrated horror film, Tourist Trap. So in conclusion, let's go over the list one by one, just to make sure. I will look down at my phone to refer. Number 5 was Predator. Number 4 was Zombie. Number 3 was Last Night in Soho. Number 2 was Crimson Peak. And number 1 was Tourist Trap. So those are Justin's top 5 most underrated horror films. I do hope you enjoyed this video. And do remember, if you haven't already done so, be sure to just hit the subscribe button right here below. And if you've never watched any of those 5 films, I highly suggest getting to it. And I would recommend them in the order going from 1 to 5. I'm going to assume here that most people have seen Predator. So, but if you haven't, be like me. Watch it for the first time, be amazed, and then after you're done with the film, be like, I can't believe it took me over 30 years to watch that film for the first time. No one to blame but myself. No one to blame at all. But yeah, definitely check out those 5 films. And hey, if I'm the reason that you watch them because you watch this video, feel free to reach out to me wherever, social media, text me if you have my number, leave a comment below, wherever. This has been the top 5 most underrated horror films. I will actually be back in a little bit for another video. So, and of course it's horror related. So stay tuned.